The emergency assembly had been summoned 3 hours earlier. Inside the vast council chamber, which hovered in orbit above Veron Prime, delegates representing 47 species occupied their assigned positions. The air was heavy, thickened by the overlapping atmospheres needed for each species to breathe with ease. At the central platform, Speaker Thindle stood with his feathered crest pressed flat against his head, a clear sign of deep unease. Behind him, the massive holographic projection revealed a sight that sent a chill through every being present. 10,000 Crimson markers, 10,000 Rexian warships, advanced in flawless formation toward council space. It had been the look of someone holding a secret. 4 days. He thought about the fact that in just 4 days, they would lay eyes on this Indomitable, the single vessel humanity believed would be enough. A part of him burned with anger. Another part felt betrayed, but deep within, an instinct shaped by eons of evolution stirred with something else. Curiosity, and just beneath that, a faint edge of fear. At the staging point along the Veron defense line, the space was thick with ships. 3,247 vessels from 46 species had gathered, arranged in formations stretching across millions of kilometers. At the core sat enormous Calarian dreadnoughts, their massive hulls dominating the view. Smaller cruisers, destroyers, and frigates filled the outer rings. Aboard his flagship, the Eternal Glory, Admiral Vexar stood on the bridge. A towering Reptarian nearly 3 meters tall, his dark green scales gleamed under the lights. His sharp eyes could track multiple targets at once. A veteran of 17 campaigns, 14 of them victories, he was regarded as one of the most brilliant military leaders in council space. And he was livid. "Where is this human ship?" he hissed. "They said 4 days." "Sir, detecting a jump signature," his tactical officer replied. "Sector 7, mark the 3rd. "Finally!" Vexar snapped. "Put it on screen." The main display flickered to a patch of empty space. Then, as if reality itself had split, a vessel emerged from faster-than-light travel. Vexar stared. "That's it?" he said slowly. "That's their contribution?" The Indomitable was tiny. By galactic standards, it was barely larger than a corvette, perhaps 150 meters long. Its design was bizarre. Not smooth and elegant like most ships, but angular and harsh, as though the hull had been carved by a blade. There were no glowing shields, no blazing weapon arrays. It floated in the void, gray, silent, and disturbingly small. "Open a channel," Vexar ordered. Moments later, a human face filled the screen. A man with short, dark hair, calm eyes, and a simple Navy uniform with a few insignias on the collar. "This is Captain Lee Hyun of the Earth vessel Indomitable," the man said evenly. "Reporting as ordered, Admiral." "Captain Lee," Vexar forced his tone to stay neutral. "I was told Earth would be sending military support." "You're looking at it, sir," Lee replied. "One ship," Vexar hissed, his claws digging into the chair's metal. "One small ship against 10,000 Rexian warships?" "Yes, sir. Captain, I mean no disrespect, but we need real reinforcements. Battleships, carriers, dreadnoughts." "With respect, Admiral, you have what you have," Lee said calmly. "The Indomitable is here to assist. We'll do our duty. And what exactly do you think one corvette can accomplish?" "We're not a corvette," Lee replied, a faint hint of amusement slipping into his voice. "But I understand your doubts. If you permit me aboard your flagship, I can explain our capabilities." Vexar wanted to reject him, to send that insolent little ship back to Earth. But council orders were absolute. All vessels had to be integrated into the defense. "Very well," he said. "You may beam aboard." "We don't have that technology," Lee replied. "I'll bring a shuttle." 10 minutes. The screen went dark. "Beam technology?" Vexar's tactical officer muttered. "Humans don't use matter transport?" "Apparently not," Vexar growled. "How primitive can they be?" 10 minutes later, a small shuttle from the human vessel docked with the Eternal Glory. Vexar personally went to the docking bay, accompanied by several senior officers. He wanted to see these humans up close. When the shuttle door opened and 4 humans stepped out, Vexar froze. The officers at Vexar's side froze. Something was off about the humans. That was his immediate thought. They moved wrong. Most species in the galaxy came from worlds with moderate gravity, their movements naturally fluid and effortless. These humans moved as if under some invisible burden, as though each step carried extra weight. Their uniforms strained slightly against compact, powerful muscles. It was as if gravity itself had forged them into dense, efficient packages of flesh and bone. Captain Lee stepped forward. Though shorter than Vexar, he had a solid, imposing build. His dark eyes swept across the docking bay, sharp and assessing, and Vexar felt, uncomfortably, that he was being measured as a possible threat. "Admiral Vexar," Lee said. Extending his hand in the traditional human greeting, Vexar accepted the gesture cautiously. Lee's grip was firm, uncompromising. The bones in Vexar's hand protested under the pressure. "This is Commander Kang Minho, my executive officer," Lee introduced, gesturing to another human male. Chief Engineer Cho Yuna, a keen-eyed woman, nodded curtly, and Dr. Han Junho, our medical officer and xenobiologist. "Welcome aboard," Vexar said, though his voice carried a note of displeasure. "I must admit, Earth's response to this crisis has been disappointing." "I understand," Lee replied evenly. "May we proceed to the briefing room? I have information that may prove useful." Inside the briefing room, commanders from across the Allied fleet were assembled. Representatives from every major species turned their gazes on the four humans, faces reflecting everything from anger to condescension. The humans took their seats, the chairs creaking under their weight. Vexar activated the tactical display. A holographic map filled the room, showing the defensive perimeter and the massive Rexian armada advancing from the opposite side. "Our forces are organized into 3 defensive layers," Vexar explained, indicating the first line. "They'll strike here first. We'll withdraw to the second line, then the third. The objective is to make them bleed for every meter while civilians are evacuated behind us." "A fighting retreat," Lee observed with a nod. "Sound tactics given your situation." "Given our numbers without proper human support," the Quran commander interjected icily. "Perhaps if Earth had sent more than one ship, we might actually hold the line." Lee turned his gaze toward the Calarian commander. His expression remained composed, but the glint in his eyes made the crystalline being involuntarily step back. "The Indomitable is what Earth could spare," Lee said softly. "We have other commitments." "Other commitments?" Someone scoffed. "What could possibly be more important than this?" "Nothing," Lee replied. "Which is why we're here." "Admiral," he continued, "I request that the Indomitable be positioned in the vanguard, first line of defense." The room went utterly silent. "Captain," Vexar said slowly. "The first line will take the heaviest hits," Vexar warned. "You'd be destroyed within minutes, perhaps." "Perhaps," Lee said evenly. "But we can inflict more damage at the front than hiding in the back." "This is suicide," one commander snapped. "Are you trying to get your crew killed?" "No," Lee replied calmly. "I'm trying to protect your crews. Put us in front. Give us open firing lanes. Let us do what we came here to do." Vexar studied him carefully. There was no trace of fear in the human captain's expression, no doubt, no hesitation. Just a steady, quiet confidence that struck him as either profoundly courageous or dangerously reckless. "Very well," Vexar said at last. "For your own protection, I'll place your vessel in the rear guard instead." Lee gave a faint smile. "As you wish, Admiral. But I have one request. When the fighting begins, keep your ships clear of our firing arcs. We'd rather avoid friendly fire. Your firing arcs?" The Calarian commander scoffed. "And what exactly do you intend to fire at them?" "You'll see," Lee said, rising to his feet. His crew followed suit. "Thank you for your time, Admiral. We'll return to our ship and make preparations." As the humans exited, Dr. Han Junho lingered at the doorway. He turned back to the assembled commanders with an almost cheerful expression. "A word of advice," he said lightly. "When we engage the Rexians, you might want to look away from your view screens. Some of what you'll see might be unsettling. We fight differently than you do." And with that, he followed his captain out. Silence held the briefing room for several long moments. Did that sound like a threat to anyone else?" someone finally asked. "No," Vexar said slowly. It sounded like a warning. He accessed the Council's database on Earth. High-gravity world. Oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere, slightly toxic to most species. Violent weather systems. Millions of predator species. Classified as a Class 12 death world. A place where survival itself was a daily battle. And somehow, humanity had not only endured, it had flourished. Built cities, raised fleets, reached the stars. Vexar turned back to the tactical display. A single insignificant dot represented the Indomitable as it maneuvered into position at the rear of the formation. Maybe, he muttered to himself, we should have asked Earth a few more questions before passing judgment. But it was too late now. The Vexian armada would arrive in 2 days. Soon enough, they'd all find out what one human ship could do. They came exactly as predicted. 10,000 Vexian warships burst out of faster-than-light travel, perfectly synchronized. On Vexar's view screen, the black swarm spread out like a tide of mechanical insects, each vessel identical, a void-colored wedge bristling with weaponry. No windows, no insignias. Just engines and guns, all ships to battle stations, Vexar commanded. First line, prepare to engage. Across the defense grid, 3,000 Allied vessels roared to life. Weapons charged and energy shields shimmered in a kaleidoscope of colors, blue for Calarian, green for Forian, red for Manthar. The void between fleets flared like a celebration. The Vexians fired first. Thousands of plasma bolts and energy beams ripped through the darkness toward the defenders. The first line of Allied ships returned fire. Space exploded into chaos, bursts of light, detonations, and streaking weapons. Ships on both sides took heavy hits. Shields flared, flickered, and failed. Hulls melted under the relentless assault. First line is taking heavy casualties, Vexar's tactical officer reported. They're falling back as planned. Vexar watched grimly as red icons on the tactical display winked out one by one. Each symbol represented a ship and its crew, dying in the cold void of space. They had expected this. The Vexians had overwhelming numbers. All the Allies could do was make them pay dearly and buy time for civilian evacuations. Second line, prepare to cover the retreat, Vexar ordered, but the Vexians weren't slowing down. They surged forward through the debris field, firing non-stop. More Allied ships were destroyed. The once carefully structured defensive formation began to unravel. Admiral, we've lost 40% of the first line, someone reported. They're requesting permission for full retreat. Granted, Vexar said, his heart's heavy. The battle was going even worse than the simulations had predicted. Then the communications officer spoke up. Sir, incoming transmission from the Indomitable. The human ship. Vexar had almost forgotten about them. Positioned so far to the rear they hadn't even been touched by the battle yet. What do they want? The screen flickered, revealing Captain Lee's face. Behind him, Vexar could see the dimly lit human bridge, illuminated only by red emergency lights. The crew was strapped into their chairs, ready for battle. Admiral, requesting permission to engage, Lee said calmly. Captain, you're in the rear guard, Vexar replied. You won't be needed for several hours. With respect, sir, we're needed now, Lee said firmly. Your first line is collapsing. If we move now, we can relieve the pressure. One ship cannot relieve pressure from 10,000, Vexar snapped. Stay in position. Lee's voice remained patient but resolute. I am requesting permission to engage. If you do not grant it, I will engage anyway. It would be better if you grant it. Vexar felt a flash of anger, but then he looked at the tactical display again. The Allied fleet was dying. What harm could one human ship do by throwing itself away? Permission granted, Vexar said finally. Try to draw some fire away from the first line. Understood, Lee replied. His voice cut through the comms clearly. All Allied vessels, this is Captain Lee Hyan of the Indomitable. Clear firing lanes along Vector 77, Mark 3rd. I repeat, do not cross into our firing solution. Indomitable out. The screen went dark. Arrogant, the Karen commander muttered. One ship ordering the entire fleet around. Let him go, Vexar said quietly. At least he'll die believing he made a difference. On the tactical display, the tiny icon of the Indomitable began to move, fast. Much faster than any ship of its size should be able to. It shot through the Allied lines like a bullet. What's their speed? Vexar demanded. 7 times light speed and still accelerating, the tactical officer answered, stunned. Sir, that's impossible. The gravitational forces should tear that ship apart. But the Indomitable held. It accelerated past the retreating first line, past the second, heading straight for the Vexian horde. They're going to ram, someone whispered. Insane. Completely insane, Vexar muttered. The human ship was now alone in the vast space between the two fleets. Thousands of Vexian weapons locked onto it. They're dead, Vexar said softly. Then the Indomitable opened fire. What Vexar noticed first was the difference. There were no energy beams or plasma bolts. Instead, streaks of something else shot out from the human ship, moving so fast his eyes could barely follow. The projectiles slammed into a Vexian vessel in the front line. There was no bright explosion, just a small impact point. Then the entire ship tore apart from the inside. Hull plates peeled away. Decks buckled. The vessel shattered like glass struck by an invisible hammer. What was that? Vexar demanded. Before anyone could respond, the Indomitable fired again. And again. Each shot punched through Vexian ships as if they were made of paper. The human ship began to spin, unleashing its weapons in all directions. Then something else happened. Brilliant flashes erupted across the Vexian fleet, not the clean, controlled bursts of energy weapons, but massive, violent detonations that consumed everything around them. Nuclear detonations, the science officer said in a shocked voice. Sir, they're using nuclear weapons. That's impossible, the Calarian commander exclaimed. Nuclear weapons have been banned for 3,000 years. They're too indiscriminate, too dangerous. But clearly the Indomitable hadn't received that memo. More nuclear explosions blossomed across the Vexian formation. Ships clustered too closely were caught in the blasts. Radiation surged across their hulls, frying electronics and killing systems. They're not discriminate, Vexar said slowly. They're effective. On the display, the human ship moved through the battlefield like a dancer, spinning, twisting, weaving between lines of fire in ways no warship should be able to. Then Vexar realized something astonishing. It has no shields, he murmured. The Vexians were hitting the human ship with energy weapons and plasma bolts, but nothing seemed to damage it. How are they surviving those hits? Someone demanded. Armor, the science officer replied, eyes glued to his instruments. Pure physical armor. Layers of metal and composite materials. The energy weapons are striking, but they're not penetrating deep enough to cause critical damage. Vexar watched in awe as the Indomitable tore into the Vexian front line. It didn't fight like a conventional ship. It fought like a predator, targeting weak points with surgical precision. The joints between hull sections, exposed power cores, critical weapon systems. Every shot was devastating. Allied casualties have dropped by 30%, the tactical officer reported. The Vexians were redirecting their fire, focusing everything on the human vessel. Of course they were. The Indomitable was killing them faster than the entire Allied fleet combined. 6 more Vexian ships shattered under its guns. The space around the human ship was becoming a graveyard. On the main screen, Vexar saw debris from wrecked Vexian vessels drifting in every direction. Then he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The Indomitable was using the debris. It flew through the wreckage fields, deliberately targeting and accelerating chunks of metal toward other Vexian ships, turning the battlefield itself into ammunition. They're insane, someone whispered. No, Vexar said softly. They're experienced. This is what warfare looks like when a species has been doing it for their entire history. He pulled up Earth's file again. Humans had been fighting wars for over 10,000 years, against each other, against their environment, and sometimes against their own creations. They had developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet, and then had the discipline not to use them. Mostly. These weren't soldiers trained in sterile simulations. These were the descendants of warriors who had fought in mud, blood, and fire for millennia. Sir, the Vexian fleet is breaking formation, the tactical officer reported. They're trying to surround the human ship. Hundreds of Vexian vessels converged on the Indomitable, firing everything they had. The space around the human ship became a solid wall of weapons fire. For a moment, Vexar thought it was over. No vessel could survive that kind of concentrated attack. Then Captain Lee's voice came through the communication channel, broadcasting to the entire Vexian fleet in every language. "This is Captain Lee Hyun of the Earth vessel Indomitable," he said, his voice calm, almost bored. "You have threatened the Galactic Council. You have threatened humanity's allies. This is your only warning. Retreat now, or we will show you what human warfare really means." Bixathar leaned forward. What did he mean? What they'd been watching for the past 15 minutes already felt like the end of the world. The Vexian fleet did not retreat. They intensified their attack. "So be it," Lee said. The Indomitable stopped spinning. For a heartbeat, it hung motionless in space, surrounded on all sides. Then every weapon system on the ship fired simultaneously. What followed would later be known as the Verne Massacre. The Indomitable unleashed weapons the galaxy hadn't seen in thousands of years. Kinetic kill vehicles traveling at 90% the speed of light, fusion warheads, high-yield chemical explosives, even biological agents that didn't kill crews but devoured ship systems from the inside out. And through it all, that single human vessel danced, a whirling, killing storm, efficient, precise, and horrifyingly beautiful in its destruction. By the time the Allied fleet caught up, the Indomitable had destroyed or disabled over 200 Vexian ships alone in just 20 minutes. Vexthar stared at the tactical display and understood. Humanity hadn't sent one ship because that was all they could spare. They had sent one ship because one was all they needed. The battle had now raged for 3 hours. Across the Vin defense line, ships fought and died. But the center of the battle, the place where the fighting was most furious, was always wherever the Indomitable was. On the bridge of the Eternal Glory, Admiral Vexar no longer tried to coordinate the Allied fleet. He simply watched the human ship as one might watch a natural disaster. It couldn't be controlled, only witnessed. Vexian casualties now exceed 800 ships, the tactical officer reported. Allied casualties stand at 412. Vexthar did the math. Without the human ship, they would have lost over 1,000 vessels by now. The Indomitable wasn't just fighting, it was keeping the entire Allied fleet alive. "Put their bridge feed on screen," Vexathar ordered. "I want to see how they're doing this." The main view split in two. One half showed the raging battle outside. The other showed the human bridge. It was chaos. Warning lights flashed. Smoke drifted through the air. Yet the crew sat calmly at their stations, speaking in quick, clipped, efficient sentences. "Lieutenant Kim, target the cluster at Mark 7, Captain Lee commanded. Strapped into his chair, his hands moved rapidly across the console. "Locked," replied Lieutenant Kim's man, a young woman with sharp eyes. "Firing solution ready. Fire." On the external view, 6 more Vexian ships shattered as railgun rounds tore through them, so fast that each shot punched through multiple ships in a single pass. "Engineering. Status report," Lee said evenly. Yuna's voice came over the comm. "Hull breaches on decks 3 and 7. Nanomachine repair systems are handling it. Port railguns overheated. 4 minutes until it's back online. Starboard nuclear launcher is jammed. Working on it?" "Understood," Lee replied. "Helm, bring us about. I want the starboard side turned away from enemy fire while they clear that launcher." "Yes, sir," Pilot Shannara responded, watching from the Eternal Glory. Vexthar finally understood how the humans were surviving. Shannara wasn't just dodging incoming fire. She was anticipating it, moving the ship before the Vexians even pulled their triggers. It looked almost supernatural, as if she could read their minds. "How is she doing that?" Vexthar asked his tactical officer. "I don't know, sir. She's predicting their firing patterns before they happen." On the Indomitable's bridge, Dr. Han Juno spoke up. "Captain, I'm detecting biological stress signals from the Vexian crews. They're becoming fatigued and disoriented." "Psychological warfare protocol?" Lee asked. "Working as intended," Dr. Han confirmed. "The music and broadcasts are affecting them. They didn't evolve to handle this kind of sensory input." Vexar leaned forward. "What music?" His communications officer checked. "Sir, the Indomitable is broadcasting on all frequencies. Human war music, messages in multiple languages ordering the Vexians to surrender." Put it on audio, Vexthar ordered. The bridge speakers crackled to life. A wall of human sound filled the command deck, loud, relentless, packed with pounding percussion and what sounded like human voices screaming. The beat matched the rhythm of a human heart in combat. Fast, aggressive, merciless. "Turn it off," Vexthar said after only 5 seconds. His own hearts were racing. "I understand why the Vexians are disoriented. That's psychological torture." On a side screen, the Calarian commander appeared. His crystalline face pulsed yellow, confusion. "Admiral, are you seeing what the human ship is doing to the disabled Vexian vessels?" "Show me," Vexthar said. The view shifted to a disabled Vexian warship. Power gone, weapons dead. By galactic convention, it was no longer a target. Normally, both sides would rescue stranded crews after the battle. The Indomitable fired on it anyway. The ship exploded, taking its entire crew with it. "They're executing survivors," the Calarian commander said tightly. "That violates every convention of civilized warfare." Vexthar watched as the human vessel methodically annihilated every Vexian ship it had disabled. "No prisoners. No survivors. No mercy. Get me Captain Lee," Vexthar demanded. A moment later, Lee appeared on screen. His crew worked calmly behind him. A cut ran down his forehead, blood streaking his face. He didn't seem to notice. "Yes, Admiral," he said evenly. "Captain, you're destroying disabled vessels," Vexthar said. "Those crews have surrendered." "No, Admiral, they haven't," Lee replied. "Their ships are disabled. That's not the same thing. Until they formally surrender, they remain valid military targets." "That's not how civilized species conduct war," Vexthar said. Lee's expression didn't change. "Admiral, with all due respect, you asked for our help. We're helping you the way we know how. If you'd prefer we fight by your conventions, you should have been able to win this battle yourselves." It was a brutal truth, delivered without emotion. Vexthar had no response. "The Vexians came here to destroy you," Lee continued. "To kill billions. We're making sure they can't. We're making sure that any Vexian who survives goes home and tells others what happens when you attack our." "You executed survivors," the Karan ambassador said coldly. "I destroyed disabled military vessels that had not formally surrendered," Lee corrected evenly. "There's a difference. And I did it so that every Vexian who made it home would tell their leaders and their military exactly what happened here. Do you know what they'll say?" His voice dropped to a quiet, deliberate intensity. "They'll say, 'Do not attack the Council. Do not attack humanity's allies, because if you do, the humans will come, and they won't stop until you're broken.'" The chamber fell into uneasy silence. "The Indomitable isn't even a battleship," Lee continued. "By Earth standards, it's classified as a light patrol frigate. We have destroyers. We have cruisers. We have dreadnoughts built for war that would terrify you. But we don't send those ships to Council conflicts because we know how you'd react. We send smaller ships, ships that can help without causing panic." "One frigate destroyed an entire fleet," Admiral Vexthar said. He had been invited to address the Council. "What would one of your battleships be capable of?" Lee met his gaze. "You don't want to know, Admiral, and I hope you'll never have to." Ambassador Park rose to speak. "The Council faces a choice. Some among you have called for humanity's expulsion. They say we are too dangerous, too violent, too frightening to be allies." "They're right," Lee said without hesitation. "We are dangerous. We are violent. We learned to fight on a world that tried to kill us every day. We evolved as hunters and predators. That's our nature. But it's also our nature to protect those we care about. Your species are our friends. We will not abandon you." "Even if we fear you?" the Threan asked quietly. "Yes," Lee answered. "Fear isn't the opposite of friendship. Fear is respect for capability. You should fear what we can do. But also know we'll only use that power to protect you." The Thorian ambassador glowed blue in thought. "What exactly are you proposing, Captain?" Lee glanced at Ambassador Park. She nodded and addressed the assembly. "Earth proposes a new role for humanity within the Council. We will become its guardians. Our ships will patrol the borders of Council space. We will respond to military threats. We will be the weapon you hope you'll never need but will be grateful to have." "Like a guard dog," someone muttered. Exactly like a guard dog, Park replied, loyal to its home, protective of its pack, but dangerous to any who threaten it. And if we refuse? The Calarian ambassador demanded. Then we'll leave the council, Park said simply. We'll maintain trade and diplomacy, but we won't pretend to be something we're not. We are warriors. That is both our gift and our curse. Accept it or reject it. Threndal looked around the chamber. This requires a vote. But first, I want to hear from those who fought beside the Indomitable. Admiral Vexthar stood. His scales had lightened in color, a sign of careful thought. I fought alongside Captain Lee and his crew. I watched them for 3 hours. And I'll say this, they saved my fleet. They saved my life. Their methods disturbed me deeply, but they worked. He paused. I would rather have humanity as a friend than as an enemy. I vote they stay. One by one, other military leaders rose. Some echoed Vexthar's sentiment. Others argued for expulsion. But as the speeches continued, the outcome became clear. When the vote was finally tallied, 39 species voted for humanity to remain. 6 voted against. 2 abstained. The measure passes, Speaker Thyndall announced. Humanity will assume the role of guardians of council space. Captain Lee, I hope you understand the trust we are placing in you. I do, Speaker, Lee replied. And I promise you this, no one will dare attack the council while Earth stands watch. Not because they can't win, but because they'll know the cost of trying. The session was dismissed. As ambassadors filed out, many gave the human delegation a wide berth. Some looked on with gratitude, others with fear, a few with both. 3 hours later, Captain Lee and his crew were back aboard the Indomitable, preparing to deploy on their new mission, patrolling the vast border between council space and the lawless territories beyond. One ship to cover 12 light years of border, Commander Kang muttered. Studying the star charts, they either trust us completely, Lieutenant Kim said dryly, or they're terrified. Both, Chief Engineer Choyuna replied as she ran diagnostics. They fear us enough to hand us this responsibility and trust us enough to let us keep it. Lee sat in his command chair, tired but calm. Through the viewport, the Allied fleet shimmered in the distance, thousands of ships from dozens of species working together to rebuild. Captain, Dr. Han Junho said softly, do you think they'll ever see us as anything other than monsters? Lee considered for a long moment. Maybe not, he admitted. Maybe to them we'll always be the things that go bump in the night, the predators their grateful prowl on their side of the fence. Does that bother you? Han asked. No, Lee said. Because I know the truth. We're not monsters. We're humans. And humans protect their friends, even if it means becoming the nightmare their enemies fear. Helm. Set course for our patrol route, Lee ordered. Course ready. Captain, Pilot Shannara said. Engage, Lee replied. The Indomitable turned and surged toward the edge of council space. Behind it, the Allied fleet watched, some with relief, others with unease, but all grateful that the human warship was flying away from them, not toward them. Across dozens of worlds in countless meetings, the story of the Battle of Veron was already spreading. It would be exaggerated, retold as legend to children and as a warning to soldiers, and on every border of council space, potential enemies would see small human ships moving through the darkness. They would remember the story, how one human ship crushed an entire fleet, and they would choose to go elsewhere, because one ship was enough. One human ship was always enough.